Chapter 1. White Eyes. The biting cold wind of the Northern Territory whistled through the old wooden cabins of Frosty Village, carrying the scent of frozen earth and the despair of mortals. That night, under a starless sky, a child was born. In one of the most distant cabins of the village, a woman with straight black hair and a gentle smile looked at her only happiness in this world. "He's a beautiful boy, that's good. His name will be Kirian. Just as his father wanted," the woman said with a gentle smile, but at the same time, small tears began to fall from her face. Her labor was done without any help. She was alone in the room, looking at her baby in her arms while trying to calm her breathing. When she saw him open his little eyes, then, that frightened her. From her eyes, the tears started to fall even more. The baby, in her arms, looked at her attentively while blinking, without any crying, as he should have. But that was not what mattered to her. "My baby. Kirian. His eyes. Is he blind? No, no. Why?" "God," she said as a terrible pain arose in her soul. It was sadness, guilt, pain. When her son opened his eyes, they were white as snow. There was nothing, no pupils, no life. That immediately made her feel like a terrible mother. She knew how hard life was for those who lived in this region. Crippled children were discarded early because only the strong would survive and be of help to the village in the future. She felt guilty. Guilty that her son was not born with the health necessary to survive. Pity for the life he would have to live, the hardships he would have to endure. Her tears would not stop falling until they dripped onto the baby's face. "Forgive me, Kirian." She said it one last time before taking the deepest breath she could and wiping her tears. "It's just you and me. So no matter what happens, I won't let anything happen to you. I will protect you from everything. My baby," she said with a gentle smile as she ran her hand over the baby's head, who soon closed his eyes again, seeming to fall asleep. 3 months passed quickly, and the village and the situation in Frosty Village remained the same. Kirian's mother, Lyra, hid her baby deeply at home. Kirian's father was someone important in the village, and because of that, even after his death, Lyra still had a good stock of food. Furthermore, the village chief sometimes appeared and delivered some food to her. She hid her baby as much as possible, only letting the leader visit once when Kirian was asleep. That way, he did not see Kirian's eyes. If the chief knew her son was blind, he would never bring resources to her, as it would not benefit the village in the future. So, more time passed. Today was Kirian's birthday. Lyra woke up suddenly with something touching her face with a cold finger. "Mommy! Wake up, I'm hungry." An extremely cute voice sounded from a baby lying on Lyra's bed. She quickly woke up, pulling him to her chest and kissing his head. "Good morning, my son," she said with a bright smile. In recent months, Lyra's initial worry about her son had completely disappeared. Kirian, in fact, never cried or complained. While she heard other children in the village screaming for milk or attention, her son always remained quiet, watching everything with those big, pupil-less eyes. Lyra noticed this after a while. In fact, her son seemed to follow with his head wherever she went, as if he could see her. She thought he might be following the sound. So she tested without making noise. And again, Kirian followed her everywhere. As if, "Kirian, my baby, you can see, right?" she whispered to him as tears welled on her face. Kirian smiled at her, as if saying yes, even though he didn't understand what she was saying. But she was right. Kirian, in fact, was never blind. Since birth his vision was completely normal. But there was something different, something no one there would understand. Everywhere Kirian looked since birth, particles danced in the air, intertwining absolutely everywhere. Something no mortal in this small remote village would know existed. But Kirian could see them perfectly, and whenever he could, he instinctively tried to grab them with his small hands before trying to throw them into his eyes. When Lyra saw him doing this, she didn't understand but knew her son was different. Yes, she felt he was special. And she was right. Kirian quickly began to crawl and shortly after learned to walk. Before he was 1 year old, he could already speak and converse with her. She talked to him every day and every hour since he was born. Kirian, gradually observing his mother, managed to speak and imitate what she said. And little by little, she taught him the meanings of words. "Mommy! I can't breathe." the little baby Kirian shouted with his head buried between Lyra's breasts. "Oh, sorry, I always do that." My baby." "How did you sleep?" Suddenly, when Lyra let go of Kirian, she saw his eyes. "Kirian. Your eyes, your eyes." "How?" "They changed," she said, holding him while staring deep into Kirian's eyes. At that moment, Kirian was also surprised. Because besides what he had always been able to see, the particles, he now could feel something strange around his mother. Was that worry? When Kirian turned one, a faint circle, a ring, appeared in his completely white eyes. As if it were a sketch of a pupil. But not only that, Kirian could now also feel the emotions of the people he focused his gaze on. Anger, fear, disgust. Those were the feelings he had sensed the most. Why? After turning 1 year old, Kirian's mother thought she could now show him to the others. After all, her son was a genius never seen before in the village. And his pupils seemed to be appearing, despite him having been able to see normally since birth. But Lyra realized she was wrong. Instead of people thinking Kirian was amazing or praising his intelligence, all she heard were murmurs, weak insults from scared people. Mainly because as soon as the other children saw Kirian, they started crying or running to their parents, saying he was an eyeless monster. Moreover, coincidentally, shortly after she tried to introduce Kirian to the others, children in the village began disappearing suddenly without explanation. And then, a whisper spread through the village. "It's his fault. Since that abomination appeared, 5 children have disappeared. It's his fault, yes, he is cursed, he must be expelled from the village." Lyra heard these words from people who once respected her. She felt abandoned. From that moment on, no one helped her with food, work, or anything else. It was then that Kirian, seeing his mother suffer, tied a band around his eyes. Despite the band, he could still see perfectly well. "Maybe if I hide them, Mommy will suffer less." But, unfortunately, nothing changed. Kirian never forgot anything. He remembered the face his mother had when he opened his eyes for the first time. The extremely gentle smile on her face was his best memory in his mind. He remembered the names of all the children in the village who called him cursed every time they saw him. The ban no longer made others afraid of his eyes. But still, no one wanted to get close to him. Not that Kirian cared, the only thing that made him happy was to stay by his mother's side. One day, while exploring the village alone, Kirian found a hunter, one of the few in the village. He watched him as he trained with a rusty sword while snow fell on his head. His eyes focused on every movement of the guard. For some reason, he found it interesting, and when he returned home, he perfectly showed the movements to his mother using a stick. He was able to imitate perfectly. "Kirian, where did you learn that?" she asked, extremely surprised. She remembered her husband's training, and it was so similar, it was impossible. How could her son? "I saw the guard dancing strangely like that." "Isn't it fun?" "I liked it a lot, but what is this dance?" Kirian asked with an innocent smile to his mother, who laughed at his joke. But inside, extreme happiness arose. "If you're really that genius, I worry less. You will be someone strong, yes. You have to be." Lyra thought while stroking Kirian's head and explained what the guard was doing. Now, Kirian was 3 years old, and the band was still on his head. He had gotten used to it covering his eyes. He didn't want his mother to be sad hearing what others thought of him. One day, when Kirian returned home after looking for food, he saw Lyra lying on the edge of the bed. He saw she was in terrible pain and quickly ran to her. He tried to lift her, but with his small and weak body, it was difficult. But he managed to somehow help her sit on the bed. After that, everything got worse. A dry cough consumed Lyra every day. And her body was completely weak, unable to walk more than an hour a day. And then, little by little, time was shrinking. In the village, there was no doctor, the only one had died years ago. And even with Kirian asking for help, besides the village chief who tried to look at Lyra, no one tried to help. But the village chief couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. From that moment, Kirian began stealing food, mainly for his mother, who could no longer get up. To keep her alive. "Forgive me, my baby. I won't be able to protect you," she cried while hugging him every night. Perhaps thinking he was asleep. At those moments, Kirian clenched his fists tightly. Kirian's 4th birthday came quickly. Lyra's condition was worsening more and more. Now, she couldn't even sit on the bed anymore. Kirian sat on an old wooden chair in front of the bed. Lyra looked at her son's face, with the band he never removed in front of anyone. Lyra's voice was weak today. And he felt it. Looking at her, she was suffering terrible pain at that moment. But on her face was a gentle smile as she looked at him. "Kirian, take off the band," Lyra said in an extremely weak voice. He did immediately. At that moment, Lyra looked directly into his eyes with the same smile, the same one from when he opened his eyes for the first time. Now, Kirian's eyes were different again. A pupil finally existed. It was completely grey, but there was still no iris, not even a sign that the iris would appear. "As I thought, it's my son. I know you hid them because of me." Lyra's voice sounded like a weak sigh as her eyes seemed to be losing their light. "But, please, don't hide them anymore. Your eyes are the most beautiful things I have ever seen." And then, she was gone. Her last words were so weak that Kirian couldn't hear them. But he understood completely by seeing the movement of her lips. And in the last moment before leaving, Kirian saw there was no pain or sadness in Lyra, but a spark of happiness and pride looking at her beloved son. At that moment, tears began to fall. No one knows for how long. The room seemed silent, lifeless, with the only sound being drops falling on the aged wooden floor. After having no more tears to shed, Kirian held his mother's hand one last time, just to feel something trapped in his palm. He quickly grabbed it. It was a piece of yellowed, old paper that Kirian quickly opened. "This is a letter." Chapter 2, Become Strong. Kirian, as soon as he saw the first letter, recognized that it was from his mother and immediately focused. He opened the letter with trembling fingers, still not fully accepting that his mother had. Then he read the letter slowly, his tears, which he thought had already dried, falling again. "My baby. You are special. I feel it. Your eyes are a gift, not a curse as others say. Don't hide them. Live. Fight. Become so strong that nothing can bring you down. Stronger so you don't lose to anyone, that's what your father would want. So strong that no one can hurt you. That is what I want most. And also, leave the village when you're older. You are a genius child in absolutely everything you've done. The world is big, and I want you to know it, instead of staying in this small place. Have many children too. Understand? You are my only son, you need to let our lineage spread more. I always wished for many grandchildren. And please, be happy. You are my love, my pride. And the best son I could have. Sorry for not being able to stay with you a little longer." After finishing reading the letter, Kirian was silent. His tears finally stopped falling. He looked at his mother's face. A small smile appeared on his lips. "I understand. Mom, don't worry. I will definitely become stronger. Stronger than you could ever imagine. I definitely will. Live, for you, Mom. The best life I can," Kirian said with his still childish voice, showing signs of breaking. The faint smile on his face faded as he wiped his tears. Then, Kirian went to the fireplace in his house, the only part made of stone in his home. He took the cloth still hanging around his neck and threw it into the fire, which immediately started crackling as it turned to ashes. Kirian decided he would never hide anything from these eyes his mother gave him again. Then, he also threw his mother's letter into the fire. When it finally stopped burning, Kirian put out the fireplace. Then, he left the house. A few minutes later, he returned with the village chief. He saw Lyra dead and sighed with sorrow. The village chief thought about saying something to Kirian, but seeing the boy's completely calm face, he kept his words to himself. "I want to bury her by the big trees behind the house. It was the place she liked to be the most," Kirian said calmly, but his breath faltered as he remembered his mother beneath the tree, calling him happily. "All right. I'll bring a coffin and shovels. And some people to help dig," the chief said as he left, but Kirian stopped him. "No, just bring the coffin. And one shovel. I want to do this alone," Kirian said, clenching his fist. "No one in this village helped my mother while she was sick. He knew she couldn't be helped. But no one even tried to help all this time. He would never let any of them touch her." The village chief understood. After several minutes, he returned carrying a very simple wooden coffin and handed Kirian the shovel. Then he patted the boy on the shoulder twice, sighed, and went back to his home. And then, Kirian began. The weather in the region was approaching summer. And because of that, it wasn't as cold as usual. He started removing the snow where he decided to dig. Afterward, he grabbed a pickaxe leaning behind his house, remembering his mother's words. Your father used it in the coal mine on the mountain to help the village. The pickaxe was extremely heavy for Kirian, but he didn't care. With all his effort, he began hitting the lightly frozen earth with his thin arms. Gradually, the frozen ground cracked enough for him to finish with the shovel. But at that moment, Kirian's heart felt like it would leap out of his mouth, and his breathing was extremely heavy. His body trembled as his hands burned, cuts appeared on them from using the pickaxe. But that pain and the blood dripping didn't matter. He would keep going. But then his mind recalled. Life! Kirian stopped. He lay down in the snow, looking at the sky. Night was slowly falling. His breathing calmed. Mom wants me to live. I can't let my feelings take over. If I try to dig without resting, my body won't hold. I need to grow fast, no. That's because I'm weak. Mom is right. Strength. I need strength. Kirian thought aloud as he raised one of his hands to the sky. In his vision, the particles he always saw were like silver threads dancing everywhere. Now without the cloth. He could fully use his eyes and felt different. It seemed like nothing could escape his sight. But he still had no idea what those particles in the air were. Since he opened his eyes, he instinctively brought all of them into his eyes. And now he thinks it's because of that his eyes gradually got better and better. But they seem to have reached their limit. The particles now refuse to enter his eyes. If I go to the city, will they know what these things are? Mom said the city was completely different from the village and hoped one day I could visit. The nearest city is 2 weeks away on foot. But early tomorrow the village caravan will leave to sell coal and bring food. I need to finish digging before they leave, otherwise, next time will take too long. I don't want to wait. Having decided, Kirian stood up, and in the snow, the silhouette of his small body was clearly marked. And then, long hours passed slowly. The night was cold. Kirian breathed in the cold air deeply as his body trembled. He decided not to rest anymore because if he did, he doubted he'd have the strength to finish. So, even feeling his arms almost falling off, he kept digging. Only when the dark night began to disappear did a large enough hole appear beneath the tree. He fell to his knees completely exhausted, his hands bleeding. The tiredness was an anchor, as if dragging him toward darkness. Kirian's vision began to darken. No. I can't faint, I can't. He shouted inside his mind, determined when he felt his body giving up. And that's when something changed. Suddenly, Kirian felt his eyes react, the bright particles around him, the particles he always saw, suddenly gathered and plunged into his pupils at high speed. After that, from his eyes, spreading through the rest of his body, came a sharp pain in his nerves for 3 seconds. And as soon as the pain passed, a coldness seemed to sweep his body like a tide. He gasped, feeling his muscles contract suddenly. Afterward, he felt his breathing become lighter, and his body was no longer the same as before. What? Kirian stood up easily while looking at his hands. He opened and closed them, then clenched them. He picked up the shovel that had fallen on the ground easily, as if it weighed nothing. In fact, he was stronger. What happened? What are these things? He asked, extending his hand to a nearby particle and pulling it. It then entered his right eye. Ah! They entered my eyes again. This is not the time to think about what I'm doing. Kirian realized it was already clear and decided to enter the house quickly. Seeing his mother's body, sadness arose again. But at the same time, a strong determination. He approached, placing one arm under her legs and the other under her back. Kirian carried her body like a princess, with extreme care. When he arrived behind the house, he slowly placed her in the wooden coffin. He rested his mother's head on the pillow she always used. Then he looked at her face one last time. Even after death, she still had her small gentle smile. Her long black hair spread across the coffin. Goodbye, Mom, I will remember you forever. And when I have my children, I will raise them as well as you raised me. I love you more than anything. I hope that one day, I can see you again. Kirian held back his tears, not wanting to cry in front of his mother again. Then he smiled faintly. The coffin was closed. Kirian began shoveling dirt over it, his arms moving quickly as the earth fell around the wooden coffin. The smell of earth and snow entered his nose. Above the tree, a white bird began to sing. The only sound besides the shovel hitting the damp earth. Memories passed through his mind. Memories he would never forget. In less than an hour, Lyra's coffin disappeared beneath the earth. He sighed as he watched the white bird in the tree, which stopped singing, spread its wings, and flew away. A bigger smile appeared on his face. As pure as her smile, isn't it? I got a little stronger, but... Mom. One day, when I am the strongest, I will come back here and tell you everything. Just wait. He thought before turning and going back inside. Kirian took only a small bag, containing a change of clothes and the last 2 fruits from his house. He didn't know, he had no idea what would happen next. In fact, he was eager for it. He then set off toward his village's caravan without looking back once. Without fear. His eyes now see the path, his goal. And he would follow it until he became even better than his mother and father ever wished for him. Chapter 3, Fork City. The icy northern wind hit Kirian's face as he approached the caravan. 3 carts waited at the village exit. Several men were loading sacks of coal until 2 of the carts were filled to the top. The last cart was a bit larger, covered with a thick tarp, and intended for passengers. His feet sank into the soft snow as he walked, the small bag, now a bit heavier, bumping against his hip. I want to go to the city. Kirian placed his hand on the bag, pulling out several copper coins. The men looked at him with strange expressions. Then, the person standing in front of the larger cart got down and approached Kirian. He frowned, looking at the child. But still, he extended his hand. All right. 10 copper coins. Food along the way will be on us. Kirian handed over the money without hesitation. That was all the money he had left after selling his house to the village chief. But he didn't care, all he needed now was to reach the city of Fork. He climbed into the cart. 7 people besides him squeezed onto the wooden benches. Of the 7, 6 were adult men, their faces tired and dirty after carrying coal to the other carts. The last was a little girl about Kirian's age. She looked at him with curiosity. But also a little fear. Kirian looked at her, and she hid behind her father's arm. She had heard stories that there was a boy in the village with cursed eyes and that if she were seen by him, she would suddenly vanish from the world. Kirian sensed that she was afraid of him and found it funny. After all these years, he had gotten used to it. Soon, the caravan departed. Days passed quickly. Kirian stayed quiet the whole time, sitting at the back where he could see outside. It was an endless snowy path, nothing else around. The village disappeared from his sight quickly. Apart from the snow, there seemed to be nothing. He really wondered why anyone lived there. Then he overheard the little girl talking with her father in front of him. Dad, what is the city like? The man touched her hair, messing it up a little. Many times bigger than Frosty Village. Surrounded by tall walls, stone streets, and lots of people. Really, really? Then why don't we live there? The girl asked excitedly. If we could. One day you'll understand. The man sighed. Kirian watched silently. Strange. As days passed, the scenery began to change. The endless snowy path thinned out. Little by little, patches of dark earth appeared. But the biggest change, the sparse white trees along the path, gave way to a forest. The caravan followed a path marked by old signs. Kirian observed, those trees were beautiful, their leaves yellowed. For the first time, he saw trees that weren't white. With stops at night and sometimes slowing down, the journey took almost 3 weeks. I've been absorbing these strange particles all this time. But it seems the limit is much higher now. I don't think I'll reach the limit anytime soon. But I need to find out what these things are. I feel they're not simple. Kirian thought before the caravan suddenly slowed down. I've spotted the city walls. Be ready to get down and work quickly. The driver said, urging the horses to go faster. After half an hour, the carts finally stopped. Kirian got down with the other 7 men while the little girl stayed in the cart. You stay here, unfortunately, I can't take you inside the city. Don't leave the wagon, and if anything happens, yell for the soldiers. the girl's father said, kissing her head before getting down with the others. The men looked at Kirian getting off the cart with an even stranger look. What is he doing? He wants to enter the city? Doesn't he know? The girl's father thought as he looked at the child standing beside them. Kirian ignored them and focused on the caravan owner approaching the two soldiers at the city gate. He couldn't hear what they said, but he could clearly see their lips moving, understanding their conversation exactly. Only coal carriers enter. Leave everything at the warehouse, and payment will be here by night. Kirian, understanding and seeing the caravan owner returning, quickly went to one of the coal carts. Without hesitation, he grabbed a sack bigger than his torso. Before the others could react, the men's eyes widened, and their jaws dropped. They wanted to say something, but Kirian was already walking toward the entrance. They knew they couldn't delay, so they followed suit. The guards looked at Kirian as if he were a freak, but it wasn't their business, so they let him pass. As soon as he entered the city, his eyes widened. The smell here was different. Soot, roasted meat, and many things he didn't recognize. The grey stone walls surrounded hundreds of buildings with red roofs. The sounds of voices and blacksmiths hammering were loud. They walked down the main street for just 5 minutes before entering an alley. In 5 minutes, people hurried past, some looking at the group with disdain, others pretending they didn't exist. In the alley, they reached a large warehouse guarded by a soldier with a spear, wearing the same uniform as the soldiers at the gate. He opened the door to the stone warehouse. Kirian and the others placed the sacks of coal inside and returned for more. At this moment, Kirian opened his mouth for the first time since boarding the cart. Why do they treat us like this? Kirian asked the little girl's father. Oh, I thought you were mute. So you can talk. If you're talking about the soldiers and the city people, it's because we're forbidden to enter here. The man replied calmly at first, but sadly at the end. Frosty Village was founded by exiles, people who were expelled from the city of Fork to die. Exiles? Yes, maybe due to theft, murder. Nobody knows. Over 100 years ago, families were sent to die in the Forbidden Land area. But luckily, we found a place where carnivorous animals didn't live. That's why we're still alive today. Also, because we found a coal mine, now they tolerate trading with us. The man finished. Kirian listened, frowning. Forbidden Land? Why? Kirian was intrigued, yet felt strange. So everyone in the village was actually sentenced to death. And his village was a camp of the forgotten. No, I don't have to worry about them, they can fend for themselves. The only thing I need to do is survive and become stronger. The village no longer matters. Kirian decided firmly in his mind as he turned his eyes to the soldier. He felt the soldier was extremely bored, looking the other way without much care. At that moment, without hesitation, Kirian ran. His small body disappeared among the narrow alleys of the city, hiding until nightfall. His clothes clearly showed where he came from, so he needed to change. But mostly, he had to stay in the city to find a place to stay, understand more about everything, and especially about his eyes. The city of Fork at night was silent. Only a few drunks and guards on the streets, whom Kirian could easily avoid. His night vision was as clear as day. He saw everything clearly. He walked until he finally came out onto a main street again. There were a few different buildings besides houses, which he didn't know what they were. Some torches lit the night, but it would be hard to spot little Kirian even in the middle of the street. He walked until he saw a wall in the city. It wasn't very tall, just about 2.5 meters, but behind those walls, Kirian saw a large building. He immediately knew what it was. There was a symbol on the building. A silver spear. He saw that symbol on the soldiers' clothes. So he guessed this was where they lived. After walking alongside the wall, he finally found the entrance. 2 more soldiers armed with spears stood next to large torches, looking ahead bored. One was yawning while the other was talking. Kirian stopped walking, his eyes focusing on the soldier's mouth. The recruitment is early today, isn't it? They say we need more men after the bandit attack. Yes, all the city's 16-year-olds will be tested. I don't know how many will pass, but there will be more rookies in the house, maybe we won't have to guard here anymore. The other said. Recruitment. Kirian thought. A slight smile appeared on his lips. A smile that meant he had an idea. The night passed slowly, and dawn finally came. When the light appeared, Kirian left his hiding spot, walking slowly toward the soldiers. He had changed his cold-weather clothes for the only set in his bag and left the dirty clothes there. The soldiers, upon seeing Kirian approach, exchanged glances. One stepped forward, standing in front of the child. "Did you come to report something? Is there a problem?" the soldier asked. Kirian didn't think twice. "I came for the recruitment." What? You came for what?" the soldier asked, thinking he'd misheard. Meanwhile, the other soldier behind him started laughing loudly. "Ha ha ha, did you hear that? The brat came for the recruitment." The man laughed heartily, clutching his belly. The soldier in front of Kirian looked into his eyes, found the boy's bizarre eyes strange, but it didn't matter, he could see the boy was serious. "Little one, go away. This isn't something you can do now. Grow until you're 16, and then you can try the test. Until then, don't interfere with our work," the soldier said, putting one hand on his forehead, amused by the situation. He then tried to touch Kirian's shoulder with the other hand. "Come on, go home, brat, your parents must be worried." The man couldn't finish his sentence because when he touched Kirian's shoulder, he couldn't make him take a single step. Before he realized it, his hand was grabbed, and at that instant, it was as if an immense weight pulled him down, something a child shouldn't be able to do. His body gave in, kneeling in front of Kirian like a puppet. "I said that. I'm here for recruitment. If I said that, it's because I know I can join with my strength," Kirian said calmly. He didn't think or understand the consequences of doing that to a soldier. He just thought doing that would show his strength, and they would let him join the recruitment. But the soldier didn't think that way. His mind filled with anger seconds after realizing what happened, thinking a brat had made him kneel in front of his colleague. When he tried to get up and raise his arm toward Kirian again, he was interrupted by a voice that sent chills down his spine. A loud shout came from behind them. "Stop right there!" A deep, loud voice rang out from a man who had been watching everything for some time. Chapter 4, Recruitment. Stop right there. Kirian, who had been looking at the guard raising his hand to attack him, turned his face toward the voice. Someone was coming toward him with heavy steps. The soldier kneeling on the ground and the other one straightened their backs as soon as they heard the voice. Their faces were tense. "Captain Rurik," both said in unison, bowing in respect. The man didn't care about the two and looked at Kirian with interest. Then he approached until he was a meter away from him. Kirian looked at Rurik. He was taller than anyone in Frosty Village, in fact, the largest person he had ever seen. Broad shoulders and scars on both arms, which were bare. His face was ordinary, with short dark brown hair, and despite being full of scars, his face was the only place untouched. Kirian looked into his eyes. Cold, but looking at him with some interest, and that was enough. "Brat, do you really think you have the strength to become a soldier?" Rurik asked, crossing his arms. Kirian didn't hesitate and answered right away. "Yes, after all, I'm stronger than they are." "You can test me as much as you want," Kirian said, pointing to the two soldiers who were bowing. The two frowned, wanting to say something, but couldn't, because Rurik suddenly. "Ha ha ha, really interesting. Boy, what's your name?" Captain Rurik laughed, a hoarse sound that echoed through the empty and silent morning street, the coldness in his eyes lessening a bit. "Kirian, I'm 4 years old," he answered honestly. Captain Rurik was even more surprised, studying the boy for a moment. His eyes landed on Kirian's empty grey pupils, finding no iris. "Where did this brat come from? To have the strength to bring down one of my soldiers before he could react. Besides that, he shows no sign of fear or hesitation in front of me. And he seems extremely confident in himself." Rurik thought quickly before speaking. "And why the hell would a child like you want to become a city soldier at your age?" "To become strong. Very strong. I saw that soldiers are everywhere in the city. They're strong, eat well, and train. That's perfect for me to become stronger." Kirian replied honestly. If he could do it, it would be the best thing possible. He would start training and learning to fight quickly after arriving in the city. Besides, he wouldn't have to worry about food or shelter if he lived there. The captain looked at the boy, who was extremely small compared to him, but felt a determination far beyond his age. He was satisfied. "All right, brat, you convinced me. You can join the recruitment. But you'll need to prove to me that you're fit to become a soldier." Rurik said, with a rare smile on his face. Kirian could feel that the man in front of him was happy for some reason. But that was perfect, a small smile appeared on his lips. Come on, come in and show me you're not just talk. Rurik said, turning and entering the barracks. Kirian didn't waste time and quickly followed the captain's steps, passing the soldiers at the entrance without giving them another glance. The two exchanged looks. The soldier who had laughed at Kirian's words suddenly spoke. This doesn't make sense, it's not right. How can the captain let a 4-year-old take part in recruitment? If he gets hurt and it spreads through the city, it's going to be terrible. Shut up. What the hell do you know? That can't be the strength of a child, that's a little monster. The soldier who had felt Kirian's strength firsthand said, feeling awful, unable to believe he had less strength than a child. But when he thought about what happened, he knew that no matter what he did, the result would be him on his knees after being held by the brat. Kirian followed Rurik into the barracks. There were 2 main buildings, both extraordinary. They passed them until they reached a square stone courtyard. As soon as they arrived, he saw that the courtyard floor had numerous red lines marking it. Some lines were faded, others fresh, as if recently repainted. Kirian sat above the first of the lines after hearing Captain Rurik's words. Recruitment will happen in 2 hours, when everyone has arrived. So, wait at your mark, he said as he walked away, soon disappearing into one of the barracks buildings. Kirian watched his back until he disappeared, then closed his eyes, deciding to take a nap until it began. Meanwhile, on the second floor of the building, peering through a small window, Rurik watched Kirian. Let's see if you have the patience and discipline to wait 2 hours in the same spot. Or if you'll walk around, Rurik thought with a faint smile as he looked at the child. He had already decided to accept Kirian either way, this was an absolute genius like he'd never seen. Finally, someone with ambition, just like he had. But he still wanted to see everything the brat was capable of. Outside the barracks, 30 minutes after Kirian had entered, young people of all kinds began appearing, lining up in front of the barracks. After a little over an hour, 39 16-year-olds were perfectly lined up. Most were clearly children from families with some money, judging by their clothes. Others bore the marks of heavy labor on their arms. One of the 2 soldiers guided them to the courtyard and ordered everyone to stand in a line, and they did. Soon, the soldier returned to his post. For the first 5 minutes, everyone was quiet, then small murmurs began. It was impossible for people their age to remain silent, especially when anxious about recruitment. Little by little, many began talking, but the main topic of conversation was obviously the same. As soon as they had arrived at the courtyard, they had all looked at the child on the first line in confusion. Who do you think that little one is? Why is he here with us? Asked a handsome blonde youth. I have no idea, he hasn't moved even a bit since we got here. He's so still that if I didn't see him, I'd say he was a ghost, another said, not far away. Hey, and maybe he's the son of a soldier, or even the captain, for him to be here without that soldier who brought us saying anything, then he must be the child of someone important. A skinny boy with a timid expression said. Soon, everyone accepted that answer as the most likely. Kirian had already woken up about 15 minutes ago. His eyes remained closed. The surrounding murmurs didn't matter. He was there for only one reason, and that was all that mattered. At that moment, Captain Rurik appeared, walking slowly toward them until stopping a few meters away. Behind him were 4 soldiers, all holding spears. Even the captain himself held a spear, almost as tall as he was. Kirian finally opened his eyes. Welcome to recruitment. Rurik's voice echoed in everyone's ears, authoritative. The city of Fork, as the last city of the country of Valor, is extremely far from the others and therefore practically independent. It is up to us to protect ourselves from the fierce beasts and the bandits that plague our peace. You are here to become strong and capable, to protect those in need. Weakness here is not an option. Understood? Rurik said, looking at everyone. Understood, Captain Rurik. Everyone's voice rang together. The only one who said nothing was Kirian, since he didn't know he was supposed to speak. He was now thinking about what the captain had said, country of Valor. Now he knew the name of the place where he was. You will face 3 tests. Strength, endurance, and finally, you will fight. If you fail any, you're out. If you pass, well, then the fun begins, Rurik thought the last sentence to himself. Follow me, let's go to the place for the first test. The 4 soldiers moved forward and told them to form lines. Soon, 4 lines of 10 youths formed, and they followed Captain Rurik to another courtyard. First, lift and carry for 20 meters. If you drop it, you're eliminated, Rurik said, pointing to a row of massive square stone blocks. The recruits looked at each other, some nervous, others confident. Meanwhile, Kirian, who was first in the last line, waited. His height compared to the others was truly comical. Then they began, one by one, attempting it. Some, who had been waiting and training for this, succeeded, sweating and groaning in pain but reaching the mark. 7 youths succeeded. Others stumbled or lacked the strength, letting the stone block fall to the ground with a dull thud. Then, it was finally Kirian's turn. Captain Rurik crossed his arms, watching him. Kirian approached the block, crouched down, and with little or no effort, simply lifted it. In fact, he frowned. It felt easier than he imagined. What happened to my body? There's no way this strength is normal. Everyone else had such a hard time. What did those particles do? Kirian thought as he walked, and without even realizing it, he reached the 20-meter mark with ease. Then, he set it down. The courtyard, which had been in complete silence, was startled and pulled out of their thoughts by the sound of the stone hitting the ground, finally returning to reality. As soon as Kirian had started moving, everyone had wondered what he was doing. When he crouched down, they thought it would be funny to see him try to lift the stone that was half his size. But now, the only thing that happened was that they stopped breathing altogether in that moment. The captain said nothing, but a small smile formed on his lips as his fingers tightened slightly around the shaft of his spear. Soon, everyone finished the test, some happy, others with terrible expressions. The first test is over, 8 passed. The rest failed, but don't worry, you're not out yet. You will take all 3 tests, and we will decide at the end if you stay or not, even if you fail one of them. But if we notice that one of you is hiding your strength to be out, you can be sure you'll spend the rest of your life in the barracks cleaning the courtyard. Captain Rurik said with a threatening look at the group, while some of them trembled. Next test, he then ordered, as if nothing had happened. Chapter 5, Fighting the Sun was already fully visible when the second test began. Everyone was outside the barracks again, arranged in 4 rows. Listen. Run and do 10 laps around the barracks, but don't think it'll be as easy as just running. Rurik said with a strained smile. When he finished speaking, some became worried. What does he mean, as easy? Has he seen the size of the barracks? 10 laps? How many of us would even make it? And there's still going to be more. That was the thought of several young people, while Kirian's was. He wasn't thinking about anything. He just wanted to finish and ask for food. He was hungry since he hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. So it began. The recruits started running, and it really wasn't as simple as just running. From atop the barracks walls, soldiers suddenly appeared. They threw buckets of cold water and wooden logs and shouted insults, anything possible to get in the way. Rurik considered this a test of endurance, but not only physical, also mental. They had to pick themselves up even when stumbling and falling. But unlike the others, Kirian simply ran. He had already passed them all effortlessly. His small body moved with strange precision, as if he knew exactly when he would have to dodge something or stop and speed up. And he did know, he could see in time when soldiers would throw things in his path to hinder him, but he easily avoided them. Because of that, he barely got tired and kept the same pace he had started with, not his maximum speed, but still twice as fast as the other youths. Soon he completed his first lap and caught up to the others again. Some of them were collapsing, gasping for breath, some vomiting. But Kirian just passed them. Wasn't he behind us, one of them said. Yes, obviously. He's already completed the first lap, another retorted. Damn! I'm not going to lose to some brat. I'm going to make it to the end, a young man who had been lying on the ground shouted before getting up and running after Kirian. For some reason, several others became determined when Kirian passed them, following him. Soon they saw how he dodged things, some finding it amazing and trying to imitate him. None of them managed to dodge everything like he did, since they couldn't spot the soldiers as quickly as Kirian, but it still helped many to notice when the soldiers would interfere. The race became easier for them, now it was just a matter of whether their stamina could last the 10 laps. After some time, Kirian finally saw Captain Rurik and 4 soldiers standing at the entrance. He had seen these 4 soldiers above the walls during some of his laps, so they had also been interfering. Kirian reached them alone, his breathing slightly faster but nothing serious. The only thing bothering him was his rumbling stomach. Rurik looked at Kirian with an even more satisfied smile. Hearing what Kirian had done and caused during the race from the four behind him, he realized the boy wasn't just strong. An hour later, time was up. Only 5 people besides Kirian had completed the 10 laps. Only one of those 5 had also passed the strength test. The others had failed the strength one but passed this one. So Rurik gave them 2 hours to rest, and those still around the barracks were called back inside. Everyone waited in the courtyard, standing in their lines. Kirian, still in the first, sat and closed his eyes again. Rest time passed quickly. Everyone now had better expressions, which would soon worsen again. Now for the last test. Fight, you will fight one of my soldiers, Captain Rurik announced with a slightly cruel smile. I don't expect you to win, just survive for 1 minute. If you can do that, you're in. The young people immediately became nervous and restless. Kirian didn't care and just waited. Until the captain looked at him with a strange smile. You brat, you'll face me, Rurik said, pointing his spear at Kirian. Kirian was a little surprised but didn't feel fear or anything like that. In fact, he smiled. This showed the captain had good thoughts about him. I've never fought anyone, but if it's just surviving, I just have to dodge, right? It won't be that hard, Kirian thought. When everyone heard this, the courtyard was shocked. Rurik was publicly known as the strongest in the city, and he would fight a child? But Rurik ignored what others might think. All right, let's go, Rurik said, walking to a square area of the courtyard like an arena. The two stood a few meters apart. The captain handed his spear to a soldier, while another threw 2 wooden sticks to Rurik and Kirian. Kirian stayed silent, just watching Rurik. He had never fought and didn't know how to attack, so he just waited. But despite seeming idle, his eyes were fully focused on any movement Rurik made. Nothing would escape his sight. Then it began. The captain attacked first. In an instant, the stick was already near him. Fast! Kirian thought, dodging at the last second. Even though he could see the attack, it was much faster than he had imagined. But it didn't stop there. Rurik's strikes continued after the first. They were fast, brutal, and calculated to take Kirian down and knock him out, not to kill, but even so, Kirian knew that if any strike landed, a single mistake could really hurt him. The captain became even faster. Kirian's eyes kept up, but his body didn't. He didn't know exactly what to do, and the time was too short to think too much. Then he remembered, stick in hand, the movements of the hunter in his village. Instead of dodging, this time his wooden stick moved quickly, meeting Rurik's. A loud sound echoed from the impact. Rurik stayed in place, but Kirian was thrown several meters back, his small body flying. But in the air, he straightened himself and landed on his feet again, breathing heavily for the first time since his body had grown stronger. His trembling hand showed that Captain Rurik had more strength than him and was still holding back. The smile on the captain's face was so broad the other soldiers didn't know what to think. He truly seemed to be enjoying himself. Then he attacked again, even faster this time. Kirian prepared the stick, this time knowing exactly where the captain would strike. But instead of meeting it head-on, Kirian instinctively deflected Rurik's stick to the side. The stick was knocked away, hitting the ground with a dry crack and breaking on impact. But before he could celebrate, a fist was already inches from his stomach. He couldn't dodge, so his 2 small hands closed over his belly, protecting it just in time. Still, Rurik's fist hit him. A terrible burning pain erupted, and he was thrown back again. Looking at Captain Rurik, completely calm, Kirian took deep breaths with a pained expression. Was I overconfident? I thought I was stronger now, but what is this? He's much faster, stronger, and his movements are really strange. Kirian thought, a little sad. He had thought dodging and passing would be easy. Rurik, who hadn't had this much fun in a long time, was about to attack again when a soldier shouted that a minute had passed. Kirian collapsed, sitting on the ground, breathing deeply. Ha ha! Brat! No, Kirian, congratulations! You passed and became the first rookie soldier of the year. Rurik approached with a sincere smile, extending his hand to Kirian, who then stood up. He had mixed feelings. He felt like he had lost and was sad about it, but also happy he had gotten what he wanted. This isn't so bad. Captain Rurik is definitely the strongest here. If he teaches me, I can surpass him quickly. Yes, to become stronger, I will defeat him, Kirian said in his mind, looking at Rurik. Rurik felt a slight shiver when he noticed that look. It was as if the boy had made him his rival. He found it amusing but liked the boy even more. Suddenly, a sound came from Kirian's stomach. Kirian looked at the captain, who was staring at him strangely. "I'm hungry. Since I passed, now I'm a soldier, I want food," he said to Rurik, his stomach no longer hurting. "Ha ha. All right. Soldier Shi, take the boy to the mess hall to eat before the others," Rurik said. Soon Kirian was gone from everyone's sight along with the soldier. No one could utter a word, while Rurik, after Kirian left, looked at the ground where his wooden stick had broken. Remembering the whole fight, he clenched his fists. This kid is truly a complete monster. Be it in strength, speed, reflexes, reaction time, or fighting instinct, all are above an ordinary soldier. The only weakness is his small body and awkward movements. Which makes sense if he's never fought. He followed all my movements as if he knew where they'd come from, his body trying to dodge. If he had more awareness of his body and speed, he'd dodge easily. Rurik sighed. It's those eyes, isn't it? They moved in the fight, side to side, as if seeing everything. He'll probably surpass me in less than 2 years. This place is too small for him. I decided I'll train him with everything I can, and I'll send a letter with his information. Hopefully, in a few years, they'll send a martial artist to fetch him. The brat has the talent to achieve what I couldn't, Rurik said, with a heavy but happy face, determined to make Kirian a perfect fighter and teach him everything he knew. The other youths in the courtyard were staring at where Kirian and Rurik had fought, terrified. Some moves had been so fast they hadn't even seen exactly what happened. It was like two monsters clashing, one giant and one small. All right, wipe those looks from your eyes. Don't compare yourselves to the little monster. He's something that appears rarely. Someone with a talent that makes others doubt themselves. If you compare yourselves to someone like that, you'll only frustrate yourselves. Come forward, you will now fight the soldiers. Prepare yourselves mentally and try to endure, Rurik said in a loud voice that snapped everyone back to attention. Chapter 6. 1 year after all the fights had taken place, the moment finally came when Rurik would announce the test results. Of the 40 who gathered here today, 26 will become rookie soldiers. As I said, it wasn't necessary to complete all the tests. Just show potential, and then I will mold you into soldiers. Rurik's voice echoed through the courtyard as he pointed toward the approved recruits. Soon, only 25 young people remained in the courtyard, while the others left the barracks. Some had big, proud smiles. There were also those who didn't want to be there, but Rurik's threat not to hide had ended up making them give their all. You now have to choose. You can live in your homes or in the barracks. But be here when the sun is rising. No delays. Understood? Understood, Captain Rurik. They all shouted even louder. Good, training begins in 2 days. You're dismissed, Rurik said, turning his back to everyone and walking toward the mess hall. After Rurik disappeared from the young men's sight, everyone left the barracks. The smell of meat and fresh bread filled the air of the mess hall. It was practically empty for now, with only 4 soldiers sitting and chatting in a corner. On the other side, there was a child who had already eaten more than 10 loaves of bread and still had a few more on the table. Kirian was happy. He was very hungry and was finally able to eat properly. In fact, ever since his body had suddenly grown stronger, he always felt hungrier than usual. But during the trip, he had always had to eat little, just enough. Now he was going to enjoy it. Meanwhile, the conversation of the other guards reached his ears. How many do you think will pass this time? One of them said. I doubt 15 will pass, at most 10, like every year, another grumbled. No, this time it's different. We need more people. The bandits are cutting off our only supply route. If it keeps up, the city will start to go hungry. Kirian chewed as he listened to every word. Again this thing about bandits. Rurik is very strong, can't he get rid of them? He thought curiously. At that moment, Rurik entered the mess hall. The 4 soldiers greeted him respectfully. He nodded back before approaching and sitting at the table where Kirian was. You'll live here in the barracks, I imagine. You'll get a room later. You won't train with the others, but I will train you personally every day. We'll start early tomorrow, Rurik said, looking at the little one eating his 3rd loaf of bread since he entered the mess hall. Great, I'll be in the courtyard as soon as the sun rises, Kirian said with an expressionless face but happy inside. Then the rest of the day passed. Kirian didn't stay idle during that time. He walked all over the barracks, getting to know every place in the two main buildings. The older soldiers looked at him with suspicion. But they soon realized that, despite his childish appearance, he didn't act or speak at all like a child. Though he was a bit naive at times, when interested in something in the barracks, he asked direct questions, without beating around the bush, and only stopped asking when his curiosity was satisfied. Many soldiers became the target of his questions about the city and about what the soldiers did. But the one who heard his voice the most was certainly Captain Rurik. Then night came, and Kirian was in a small room on the third floor of one of the barracks buildings. It had a bed, a wardrobe, a wooden chair, and a table. There was also a book with all the rules and things a soldier should do there. After reading, Kirian quickly lay down to sleep. When he opened his eyes, it was still night but starting to lighten. For some reason, he had always woken up at this time since he was little. He left the room quickly and sat on the courtyard floor, waiting for Rurik to arrive. After about 30 minutes, heavy footsteps were finally heard. Kirian opened his eyes, and Rurik was already in front of him, holding 2 wooden sticks. He handed one to Kirian and kept the other. You arrived early, it's good to be excited. Rurik began to explain. I'll explain how it's going to work. Usually, I start by training the bodies of the new soldiers. You'll also do that, but not as much as the others. You already have ridiculous strength. I don't know exactly how you can have that strength. Were you born like this? Rurik asked curiously. Actually, no, but ever since I was born, I've been able to see things everywhere. Like here, for example, here, here, and here. These particles I see, I don't know what they are, but I've always put them into my eyes, and then one day I suddenly got stronger, much stronger. Kirian spoke sincerely about what had happened, pointing to various particles present, hoping Rurik would know something about them. Particles? Rurik asked, confused, seeing nothing. Yes, I've always seen them, but I don't know what they could be. Do you know? No. I have no idea what those things are. But if they made you strong, it's really something incredible, Rurik said with envy. I only know 2 ways to get stronger, one is to train your muscles to the limit. The other is to use a martial arts technique, along with countless medicines, to temper the body and become a martial artist. The second, very few people have the talent for. But I know you definitely do. And that's why I'll try to get you to become a disciple of one of them. Rurik said excitedly. Kirian didn't fully understand what Rurik meant, but he understood it was to get stronger, and if that was the case, he'd be happy. All right. Now let's start, stand up and attack me. Rurik said, extending the stick. Kirian did the same, but when Rurik looked at it, he was extremely surprised. Then, without waiting long, Kirian stepped hard on the ground, propelling himself forward at speed and swinging the stick toward Rurik. Rurik raised his stick, fully blocking the attack and sending Kirian flying backward, his hand trembling slightly. Although surprised, Rurik now frowned. He approached Kirian until he was beside him. Kirian thought Rurik was going to say something and praise his stance and the strike. But he was wrong. Instead of praising him, Rurik gave him a light tap on the head. It didn't hurt, but he didn't understand why. Hey, why are you hitting me? I'm sure I attacked correctly. Kirian said, slightly irritated. You're copying my movements from the fight yesterday, aren't you? Rurik asked, crossing his arms, not caring about the boy's complaint. Kirian nodded, confused. Kirian, don't do that again. Your body is completely different from mine. Lighter, your muscles aren't trained like mine, and most importantly, your size. My fighting style isn't at all compatible with your body. If you were older and copied the movements, fine, but it would still be bad. Each body is different. Instead of copying exactly what I did, learn the why of each movement, of each muscle used. And then adapt it for your use, for your body that hasn't fully developed yet. Rurik said calmly so Kirian would understand. Kirian tilted his head slightly but understood. Indeed, when he had moved like Rurik, he had done the same movement his eyes had seen, without any flaw. But he hadn't felt entirely comfortable when attacking, still, he thought it was right. He then closed his eyes, feeling his muscles. He moved with his eyes closed, his hands gripping the stick as he swung from side to side. Then he remembered Rurik's movement and did it again. But this time, something had changed. If someone were watching, they wouldn't notice, but Kirian had used strength at different moments, different muscles. Even though the attack looked the same, Kirian had perfectly adapted it to make the movement comfortable for him to use. Rurik, watching from the side, held himself back from letting his jaw drop to the floor. Damn! This boy is really a freak, Rurik thought. He had expected it would take a while for Kirian to understand and then even longer to actually do it, but the boy managed on his first try. Like this? I think I got it, now it really feels right. Come on, I'll attack again to test it, Kirian said with a smile at discovering something new. Rurik looked at the boy and laughed. And so, the real training began. Days slowly turned into weeks. Kirian ran more than everyone. Trained more than everyone. His muscles now outlined themselves under his skin, small but compact and defined. His strength increased continuously, but not as much as he'd like. What really increased at an absurd speed was his technique. Kirian had superhuman endurance. He trained morning, afternoon, and night if Rurik didn't stop him. In addition, he began to learn more about the city and the world. Rurik taught him everything he could. But Kirian's favorite part was actually when he had to fight Rurik. In the beginning, the captain held back. His movements were fast but simple, his strength restrained. But Kirian learned quickly, extremely quickly. His eye saw everything, and his increasingly trained body now reacted with total precision to it. He quickly became aware of how to control his body, no longer wasting the extraordinary advantage his eyes gave him in battle. Soon, the fights between the two became a spectacle at the barracks. They started with sticks, but after a while, iron spears began to be used. They clashed in sequences so fast that the other soldiers could barely keep up. The nickname "a monster" and the respect had already spread among all soldiers, whether new or old. Kirian didn't care, he just wanted to improve more and more. And so, a year passed. Chapter 7, Vice Captain. 1 year had passed since Kirian had become a soldier. Today was a special day. Kirian had grown, but not much. His height was still very short compared to everyone else. His face still bore all the childish features. His eyes, now, seemed even sharper. Over the past year, he had tried to learn all of his abilities. But the particles he had never stopped absorbing still showed no sign of reaching a limit. On the morning of the anniversary of his joining the city guard, the courtyard was crowded. The 25 recruits who had entered with him, the veteran soldiers, and everyone else were there to see only one thing. Kirian and Rurik stood face to face, just like when they had fought for the first time. But this time, the spears were made of iron. Kirian had a slightly smaller spear, crafted specifically for him. Kirian looked at Rurik with eyes fully focused, determination shining in them. It's been a year, and today I will defeat him, and then I will prove that I have grown stronger. Kirian truly saw in Rurik, beyond his captain, a teacher, and even a friend. He saw in him his rival, someone he had to surpass, and he would not rest until it happened. After all, if he could not defeat him, he could not call himself strong. And that is why, in addition to training and sparring with Rurik, Kirian trained with all the veteran soldiers and even the newcomers. He saw all their techniques, their ways of fighting, he recorded everything with his gaze and stole it for himself, adapting all he had taken from others, refining his way of using the spear more and more. And now he felt that he could finally defeat Rurik, and for that reason, he issued the challenge to his captain. Who, of course, accepted it with a smile. Don't hold back, Kirian said to Rurik, who only replied with a smile. He seemed excited about it as well. The two stared at each other, their hands firm on their spears. Silence seemed to hang over the courtyard as everyone held their breath. Unlike the onlookers, the two breathed deeply and calmly, and then, suddenly, they moved. Their boots pushed against the stone ground with force as they advanced at the same time. The first clash made everyone's ears ring from the impact sound. Rurik's spear came down in a heavy arc, the steel of the spearhead whistling as if it were cutting through the very wind. Kirian raised his weapon at the last instant, not because he was slow, but because he had already seen the attack forming in the captain's shoulders and arms before the tip of the spear even moved. Kirian used as much time as possible to gather strength and block at the last moment. The shock reverberated through his arms. Rurik's strength was still superior to his, as if a wall were collapsing and pushing him back. But unlike before, his body was not sent flying. Kirian retreated only 2 steps, his boots sliding on the floor, but he kept his balance. Good. Good. You've improved again. Rurik commented while spinning his spear instantly into a horizontal strike. Kirian ducked quickly before the spear crossed exactly where his head had been and slid to the side, his own spear aiming for the captain's open guard. But without difficulty, Rurik simply turned the shaft of his spear, blocking Kirian's attack with the handle. Another loud impact rang out, but neither of them gave way. The fight speed increased little by little. With every attack, Kirian saw more. The tensing muscles, the slight twist of the hips, the way Rurik gripped his left hand tighter before an upward strike. In Kirian's vision, everything seemed slower, giving him more time to think and act before the attack arrived. And now, he used this perfectly. He suddenly slipped close to Rurik's body, making the tip of his spear graze the air near the captain's chest, almost hitting him. But almost would not bring anyone down. The captain stepped back slightly, spinning his spear in his hand and forcing Kirian to retreat as well. And then he advanced again. The sequence of thrusts came like a heavy rain, each strike extremely fast and seeming to get even faster. Rurik was not holding back his strength. Kirian began parrying them all head-on, his small body dodging like a fish in a stream, but gradually he felt the weight of the blows pressing into his arms. "Brat, you've gotten faster, I admit, but it's still not enough," Rurik said with a broad smile, though sweat was already forming on his forehead. He advanced again with a top-down strike. Kirian blocked it, but this time Rurik seemed to push with even more weight and power, forcing Kirian toward the ground. He had no choice but to bend his knees and spin to the side at the same moment, letting Rurik's spear smash against the stone floor, throwing sparks and echoing with a metallic sound. At that moment, Kirian saw the perfect opening. 1 step, 2 steps. The tip of his spear lunged toward Rurik's neck, who lost time when his own spear hit the ground. Rurik raised his eyes, seeing the spear's tip approaching, his left hand releasing his weapon and grabbing Kirian's spear's shaft just a few centimeters from hitting him. The whole courtyard held its breath. Because Kirian's spear was smaller, he had to get closer, bringing him extremely close to Rurik now. Rurik used his strength to lock Kirian's spear in his hand with brute force. And with his right hand, his own spear was already ready, aimed directly where Kirian's body was. Kirian could drop his spear to dodge, but doing so would mean losing his weapon and inevitably the fight. He knew this, so he let the attack come closer, still pretending to use all his strength to pull his spear from the captain's grip. When Rurik's spear was at its lowest and almost at his head, Kirian jumped. Rurik's strikes were always low because of Kirian's height. Using this, Kirian leapt high forward, his right hand holding his spear, which Rurik gripped firmly, as support. Rurik, who had been pressing the shaft with all his might, suddenly lost focus, no longer feeling the boy contesting in strength. Kirian spun his small body in the air, making his right heel descend directly toward Rurik's head with all his force. Rurik smiled, dropped his spear, and raised his right arm as fast as possible, blocking the kick with his forearm. His left hand, at that moment, released Kirian's spear, and a punch shot directly toward the boy's body. The fist came like a hammer, making Kirian cross his arms at the last moment. He was then sent backward, landing on the stone floor, his boot sliding slightly, but he was fine, only his arms trembled a bit. Rurik, in turn, had taken steps back from the kick's impact. The block had actually left his arm numb, and his labored breathing betrayed his effort. "TSK, this little monster already has strength almost equal to mine. When he arrived, I had to hold back, but now, I thought it would take him 2 years to surpass me, but in another month or 2, I doubt I'll be able to face him. Ha ha, maybe I'm getting old." Rurik thought, but he could not have been happier to see Kirian becoming more and more monstrous. The two stared at each other, their spears on the ground. Neither took the first step. Even after all that, I still couldn't defeat him. I thought I was ready, but... Captain Rurik has also grown stronger in this time, hasn't he? Rurik is not someone easy to surpass. Kirian thought in his mind. But if he said that out loud, the others would not know how to feel. Kirian was only 5 years old now, while his captain was already 40, and in just 1 year they were fighting as equals. Both seemed to have given up, knowing that if they continued, they would remain in a stalemate. Everyone then realized the fight had ended in a draw. Suddenly, applause began. The soldiers' shouts were extremely animated after feeling they had witnessed a spectacle. The captain smiled at this, finding it amusing, while Kirian kept his calm expression, still thinking about what he could have done differently during the fight. But at That moment, Rurik slowly stepped forward until he was a meter away. "Brat," Rurik began in a serious voice that made the others fall silent. "I have nothing left to teach you." Silence reigned. "From today on, you are the vice-captain of Forks City Guard." Kirian looked at Rurik in surprise, who looked back at him with a smile. But he nodded in agreement. In his simple mind, it made sense. After all, he was the strongest there alongside the captain. And despite his age, Kirian thought himself smarter than those foolish soldiers. Suddenly, all the guards bowed slightly. "Vice-Captain Kirian!" Rurik laughed heartily, giving several pats on Kirian's shoulder. It was truly amusing for him to see a child as vice-captain, but he was satisfied. After everyone dispersed, Rurik called Kirian to his office. As soon as he entered, Kirian noticed the slightly somber atmosphere. Rurik's feeling was one of concern. Kirian stood still in front of the desk, waiting. "I called you here because of the bandits," the captain began, scratching his chin. "A year ago, they were already a nuisance. But now they're a complete threat to our supplies." Kirian simply listened in silence. He knew a little about the bandits, but not much. "There's a reason I haven't gone after them again. The bandit leader is a strong man, not as strong as me, but still strong. And besides him, there's his brother, just as strong. If it were one of them alone, it would be simple, but the two together are impossible to face. And there's no soldier besides me who can hold his brother long enough, and if they could, the casualties would be many. And I haven't even counted the other 30 bandits, or more, if they've recruited more," Captain Rurik said slowly. "That's pretty simple, isn't it? The two of us can beat them," Kirian said directly, not seeing the problem. "In theory, it's easy to say. But Kirian, you've never fought a real battle to the death. Your comrades, the ones you know from the barracks, could die. No, some will die. You have to be prepared to fight, determined to eliminate the enemy, and not let the losses during the fight affect you. If that happens, even you could be killed if your mind isn't focused on doing what's necessary," Rurik said seriously, while at the same time doubting whether he should involve a child in this. Even with this strength, he was still a child, wasn't he? "I don't think you need to worry. I know what I have to do. If we don't go, we won't have food, and I need food to get strong." "Right," Kirian replied honestly. Rurik, looking at Kirian's determined face, sighed. "We leave in 2 days." Chapter 8, Monster. 2 days passed in an instant. The meeting hall of the barracks was silent, while the oil lamp above the table illuminated a map showing the city to the north and the frozen land. To the south, the Wolf Mountain. And in the valley between the mountains, the only route to a city was a month away on horseback. The shadow of 15 people flickered in the room, one taller than all and one smaller than everyone. Side by side, looking at the map. Rurik then leaned over the table, and with a dagger, traced routes on the worn map until he marked a spot by stabbing the dagger through it. A place in the valley between the mountain, near the route, and a waterfall. The bandits were seen here 3 days ago. Benny, who was following their trail, found their new hideout. And it's time to act. Rurik began to speak. Gorik, Doran, and the bandits attacked the last 2 caravans and stole practically everything. The merchants are afraid to travel the road and remain in the city. If it goes on like this, food will no longer reach our mouths. Not enough for everyone in the city. Rurik said angrily. So, after discussing it with Benny, I've decided it will be like this. Rurik raised his eyes toward Kirian. I, Kirian, and you 13, the best soldiers under our command, will hunt them down during the night. A frontal attack is not smart against those who have nothing to lose. And this way, it will be the best way to spare the lives of our comrades. Last time, due to my mistake, 15 soldiers ended up dying because I underestimated the enemy's strength. Rurik sighed in regret and clenched his fists. You, Kirian, will guide us through the forest at dawn. We will kill as many of them as possible while they sleep. Kirian listened attentively, keeping his expression impassive. My eyes, he asked, looking at Rurik. Yes, you can see perfectly in the dark. Your eyes will be one of the most important things in this mission. You will lead us through the dense forest without any light, without giving the enemies a chance to be alerted, and you will find their sentinels. But, for this to work, you will need to do something. Rurik pulled the dagger from the map and pointed it toward Kirian. You will have to eliminate them before they can scream. And then, find the best path for us to invade the camp. We will eliminate as many as possible before they realize. Then, the two of us will fight the brothers Gorik and Doran after removing half of their subordinates. Rurik spoke calmly. Kirian looked at the dagger in Rurik's hand. He took it without hesitation. What seemed small in Rurik's hand looked large in Kirian's. But the weight was the same. Kirian would have to take a life. He didn't know exactly what to feel about it. But it was what he had to do. He understood that everything would depend on him. This way, losses could be few, or even none. And if it failed, they would be in the heart of the enemy's base. I will kill them. Kirian replied quickly, deciding in his mind. The moon was covered by clouds that night when they left the city, making the forest even darker. Kirian led at the front, with Rurik and Benny right behind him. From here on, the forest gets extremely dense. It's very easy to get lost during the day, at night it's even worse. I followed them when it was getting dark. I marked some trees with a small cut up to where I followed them. Benny, one of the veteran soldiers, said. Kirian understood, looking carefully ahead. He managed to see one of the marks Benny mentioned. All right, you stay here. I'll go ahead alone, eliminate all the sentinels, and come back. Kirian said before moving forward. Kirian. Be careful. If you can't do it, come back, but if you decide to act, never hesitate. Never. Rurik said, placing his hand on Kirian's head, who simply nodded calmly. He went deep into the forest, a spear on his back. At his waist, the dagger Rurik had given him. He moved without hurry. While his thoughts ran free. The wind whistled between the trees as Harlan rubbed his cold hands. The night in the forest was always the same. Loneliness, cold, boredom, and the damn irritating sound of insects and the stream's water. 2 more hours, and then I switch shifts. I just want to sleep, the man thought before spitting on the ground. But then he felt it. Something was wrong. The air seemed to grow heavier all of a sudden. The cricket stopped singing. Harlan slowly turned his head, fingers reaching for the sword on the ground. He had no chance to finish, not even to react. All he felt was pain. Cold. His hand slowly rose to his neck, his fingers touching something warm trickling down it. When he pulled them back, they were a vivid red. Before him, hovering like a ghost, was a child. His eyes were dark grey, with no shine, empty. His expression was impassive. His hand held a blood-stained dagger, his blood dripping on the enemy's weapon. And the enemy was, in fact, a child. Terror consumed Harlan entirely. He tried to scream, but the only thing that came out was a bubbling of blood. He fell to his knees, hands twitching toward that small but terrifying silhouette. Were those the eyes of a human? The last thing he saw was the child tilting his head, as if studying his every expression, his suffering. And then, darkness. Kirian looked at the corpse, the scream that tried to come out never did. He felt the man's fear flowing like the blood now dripping from his fingers. The despair of life ending, the warmth fading. Am I a monster now? The sentry's body fell at his feet, eyes still open and wide in horror. Kirian looked at the dagger, then at the man's face. You saw me as a monster, didn't you? Before you died. But he remembered. They were bandits. Bandits feel no remorse in stealing or killing. How many people had he killed? How many had he starved by stealing? I don't know why Rurik thought I would feel any remorse. He looked one last time at the man's face in a pool of blood. 1. Kirian whispered, wiping the blade on the grass and disappearing into the darkness of the forest. After 15 minutes, Kirian saw the second sentinel, leaning against a tree, grumbling about how he received less while working more. Kirian watched him for a whole minute. Does he have a son, he thought, noticing a rag doll tied to the man's belt, with a needle still hanging from it, as if it had been sewn over a long time. Not thinking about it. This time, Kirian was faster. The blade sank below the bandit's ear, cutting through everything that mattered until the man lost consciousness without realizing. The doll, attached to the man, fell into the mud. Kirian crouched and picked up the rag doll. For a moment, his fingers pressed the rough fabric. He thought and decided to return it to the man who died without being able to see anything. 2. Kirian's clothes were stained with blood, the dark clouds covering the moon had disappeared. At that moment, Kirian was cleaning the blood from the dagger in a still pool beside the stream. He saw his face reflected in the water. It looked small, weak, and fragile. His eyes, still without a sign of irises, seemed to draw his attention. I don't think I'm a monster. Why does everyone, when they die, have that look of despair? Didn't they also do evil? I can't understand. Then he remembered his mother. Her face, when she went, was so simple. She died in pain but happy, looking into his eyes. He knew he was not a monster. His mother would not have given birth to a monster. This is necessary, and it will make me stronger. I have no reason to overthink it. Right. Kirian looked at himself in the reflection, above his head, the reflection of the moon. It really is beautiful, like her. He turned, heading down the forest beside the stream. He returned an hour and a half after going deep into the forest alone. Rurik and the others waited, their faces worried. Rurik wondered if he really should have sent a child to do this. But suddenly, a sound came, and Kirian appeared. It's done. He said calmly. The sentinels have been eliminated. Before one of them died, I heard that the shift change would be in 30 minutes. Follow me. I know a way to the camp. Kirian finished before turning his back and walking, Rurik and the others quickly following. How many? Rurik asked. 6. Any problems? Can you keep going? No. I'm fine, I just did what I was supposed to do. Kirian replied with an expressionless face. But as I thought, humans are, really, fragile. They can die suddenly from diseases. Or by absolutely anyone, suddenly. This is why we are weak, isn't it? I understand, ma'am. She wanted me to survive, to be strong and survive. But if I remain forever just a human, will I be truly strong? My goal was still far too low, wasn't it? I need to find out how I can become stronger. The particles are the way. My eyes are the way. I need to push harder. Kirian ended his thoughts only when smoke could be seen in the sky. He sighed and turned to everyone. The bandits are ahead. Chapter 9, Invading Rurik had been watching Kirian the whole time. The others might not notice, but how could he not? Rurik approached, standing beside the boy, his spear resting on the ground. His eye swept ahead, there was a large bonfire, and around it, several tents scattered a bit apart from each other. And on the other side, there was a cave. Kirian could see there were many things inside. Silence filled the forest, and the moonlight brought forth 15 shadows drawing closer to the camp. The silence didn't bother Rurik. What was bothering him at that moment was Kirian. His eyes, his body, they were far too relaxed for someone who had never even seriously wounded anyone, let alone killed 6 people. He knew Kirian was different. He couldn't take his true age at face value. But he saw it. Kirian's eyes were colder now. Instead of the attentive, observing gaze from before, alert but curious, Kirian now had the eyes of a hunter. Rurik didn't know if that was a good thing. Kid, are you sure you're really okay? Rurik asked again. The others also turned to look at Kirian. I am. I think. Let's finish this quickly and get out of here, Kirian said, without turning his head, moving toward the first cabin faster than everyone else. He went in and, within 5 seconds, came out. His spear was stained with blood, but his expression was still the same. The spear had pierced the man sleeping on the ground. The second one didn't even have time to open his eyes before the weight of iron sank into his chest. Kirian kept moving, step by step, to the next cabin. Rurik decided to set it aside for now and acted like the other soldiers, splitting off and starting with the outer cabins. That night, a massacre unfolded. Kirian moved faster than everyone, like a ghost slipping in and out as if nothing had happened. His superior vision allowed him to act with less caution. Not a single sound came when he entered. The bonfire danced as the wind passed through the forest and around the 15 intruders. But then, in a moment of carelessness, Benny entered a cabin larger than the others, but upon entering, he found no one. Only a strange shadow above the bed. A pillow. Benny didn't have time to finish the thought before an axe suddenly split his head. And then a scream rang out, waking everyone. Intruders! Everyone wake up! The moment the voice sounded, Rurik was the first to act. Formation! Everyone fall back and fight together! Rurik shouted but ran toward the bandits' cave. He knew that voice, it was Doran. If Doran was here, Gorik had to be in the cave, and likely alone. The brothers didn't get along well, though they fought together. The soldiers regrouped immediately, spears pointed outward, close together since they had started with the outer cabins and could regroup quickly. Kirian was still inside a cabin, his spear driving from a man's chin through his head as the man reacted to Doran's shout. In an instant, half-dressed bandits poured out of the remaining tents, weapons in hand, disoriented but angry. Kirian saw one bandit pass in front of his cabin entrance. He didn't waste a second. His spear shot up instantly, piercing the man's throat. He darted out and ran toward the source of the voice. If someone had been discovered, they were probably in trouble. 3 bandits attacked him with everything they had as soon as they saw him. The first swung down with a club. Kirian dodged easily, slicing the man's legs. The second came from behind. Kirian had already seen him. His spear spun, piercing the man's right eye and sinking deep into his head. Kirian leapt onto the man's impaled body and kicked him away, using the momentum to pull his spear free. Blood spurted from the bandit's head as Kirian lunged at the third man, who tried to stab him. But all the man saw was his world spinning. Kirian's spear tipped past effortlessly, slicing through his neck. Blood sprayed. The head fell. The body collapsed. That was when Kirian suddenly heard laughter. He turned, trying to understand. His brow furrowed instantly. A large man, face covered in scars, with a wide mouth full of yellow teeth, held a massive double-headed axe in one hand, and in the other. Benny, his head split halfway through, dangling lifeless. Well, well. What do we have here? You're human? Kid, you look more like a freak. Killing people like this at your age, the world's really gone to hell, Doran said with mock sadness. Where did this brat come from? Damn. Half of these useless fools are already dead, and the rest won't beat trained soldiers. The watchmen are dead? How did they get here so easily? Shit, I need to meet up with Gorik. Doran thought, quickly assessing the situation. He'd been outside the cave, enjoying himself with the only woman left. But who could have imagined this would happen so suddenly? Doran suddenly hurled Benny's body toward Kirian. Benny wasn't exactly a friend to Kirian. But Kirian liked him. Benny always brought all sorts of food for him to try. Now, in front of him, Benny's lifeless body, head split, was flying toward him. Kirian felt a bitter taste in his mouth. As I thought. Life really is fragile. Don't worry, Benny. I'll bring him to you soon, Kirian thought, raising his small hand toward the corpse. And at that moment, just as Benny's body was about to land in his hand, an axe came down at high speed toward Kirian. Doran had used Benny's body to distract him. But that didn't escape Kirian's sight. He couldn't block it, so he dodged, jumping back. But because of that, Doran's axe struck Benny's head again, splitting the rest down to the neck. What a monster, what a monster. How can you let your friend's body be hacked apart like that? You're really a kid. No good. I'm still drunk from last night, and this kid's strong and faster. If I fight him, I might lose. Doran said before suddenly running in the opposite direction, toward the cave. Kirian looked at Benny, his hand trembling slightly on his spear. Why? He was already dead. And yet, he got caught up in it again. Kirian didn't know why, but he didn't like it. Meanwhile, 12 soldiers were fighting 15 bandits. The fight was rough. The bandits knew the terrain far better. But despite that, the well-trained veteran soldiers quickly gained the upper hand, taking them out one by one through teamwork. Now, only Doran was left. After one last look at Benny, Kirian narrowed his eyes and sprinted at full speed toward Doran. He would kill him. For the first time, he would kill because he wanted to. Not because it was his mission. The moment Gorik heard his brothers shout, he was gearing up inside the cave. Unlike Doran, he didn't drink, and he was fully prepared. He only stepped out once he felt ready. But when he did, Rurik appeared with his spear aimed straight at his head. He saw the tall man, the scars, and the spear closing in hard. But his sword blocked the blade at the last second. So, it's you again, my friend Rurik. Looks like we just can't get along, can we? Gorik said as he lunged at Rurik with even greater speed. But Rurik blocked and dodged with ease before his spear drove Gorik several steps back. His brute strength was greater than Gorik's. Last time had been trickier because of Gorik's speed. But now, after so much training with Kirian, Rurik felt Gorik was slower. If he had been weaker before, now Rurik believed he could win in only a few moves. His spear came down fast, with raw force, from above. Gorik sidestepped, his blade sweeping toward Rurik's face. Rurik pulled back just enough to avoid the sword, while his spear swung again from the side. But then, a sound ripped through the air. Rurik felt danger at his back. Turning, he saw an axe spinning toward him at high speed. Gorik had already seen Doran in the distance and, as the axe closed in, attacked at the same time. Damn! It was Rurik's last thought as his spear blocked the sword and he tried to duck under the axe. But the axe didn't arrive at the expected moment. Instead, a loud clang echoed in his ears, the sound of metal and sparks. He felt a gust pass just beside his head, grazing it. Looking toward the axe's path, he saw, slightly to the left and farther away, Kyrian. In his hand, a bow stolen from the bandits. That was close, maybe I should train more with a bow. It's more useful and faster, especially when I can see exactly where to shoot, Kyrian thought, lowering the bow. That had been the only arrow he found with it. Doran, realizing the axe had been deflected by the arrow, was stunned. How the hell can someone do that? He glanced back, saw the boy running after him, and picked up his pace. Without a weapon, he'd die instantly, so he ran toward his brother. "Brother Gorik!" Doran shouted. Gorik understood instantly, pushing hard to kill Rurik before he could act. Rurik had to retreat several steps. Doran closed in at that moment, kicking Rurik's legs hard enough to make him kneel. The sword came down at Rurik's neck, but he focused only on blocking it. A direct hit would mean instant death. Doran was unarmed. Even if he interfered, he couldn't kill Rurik instantly. Doran clamped his hands on Rurik's neck, squeezing hard as he shouted. "Gorik, kill him now, damn it! The brat's as strong as me. Kill him and then we'll kill the brat." Chapter 10. Giant Bird. Kyrian was farther away than Doran, so it would take him longer to arrive. His cold expression turned into anger upon seeing Doran holding Rurik. He could see it, Rurik was already almost collapsing, his face was purple, and his breathing was irregular, but he kept fighting to survive. "I won't make it in time," Kyrian thought as he decided and did the only thing he could think of. His hand gripped the middle of his spear, his body twisting slightly as his arm moved back. His eyes, wide open and focused, tracked every movement of Gorik and Doran, and then the wind was torn apart by a spear thrown at high speed with the greatest strength Kyrian had ever used. All three only heard a sharp whiz when, suddenly, blood and flesh sprayed everywhere. Doran's shoulder and arm, the one that was squeezing Rurik, were shredded by the spear before it flew toward Gorik, who leapt back at the last moment. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead as he saw the spear lodged in the ground. Doran, who had been hit, screamed in pain, his flesh and bone ripped apart. He released his grip around Rurik's neck and tried to pull away. But this time it was Rurik who didn't let him escape. Before Doran could pull his arms back, Rurik seized them, yanked them upward, and hurled him over his head to the ground with brutality. The impact made the bandit arch his back completely, blood pouring from the wound like a waterfall, and a terrible scream burst from his mouth. Rurik wasted no time, and, without hesitation, his hand grabbed Kyrian's spear, which was still stuck in the ground, trying to drive it into Doran's neck. But Gorik arrived again and stepped in front, his sword completely deflecting the spear. It gave Doran just enough time to roll back despite the pain. At that moment, Kyrian finally reached Rurik's side. He noticed the strangulation marks on the captain's neck, his breathing, and his colorless face. Blood and bits of flesh were still stuck to his body. His expression turned grim as he clenched his fist. "I'm sorry. I let him get away and get close to you," Kyrian said, regretting not having chased Doran instantly before. "Don't worry, I won't die that easily. Worry about that after the fight," Rurik said, his voice extremely hoarse. But the color was returning to his face. "Benny, Kyrian didn't know how to say it, since he was close to the captain. "So it was him, he got caught, didn't he? I figured someone had been caught when I heard the scream. I just didn't imagine it would be him," Rurik said, his voice and expression sounding calm. "But, boy, we have to finish this quickly and then give Benny a proper burial. And finally, burn the bodies of those two bastards, so Benny's soul will rest in peace," Rurik said with a smile to Kyrian, but Kyrian saw it. Rurik was sad. He had never seen Rurik so sad. Yet still, he smiled. Kyrian looked ahead, resolute. He took his spear with Rurik and stared at Doran with cold anger. Doran had not only killed Benny but had almost killed his captain. Kirian was angry, at Doran and at himself. He had hesitated. Even if just for a moment, when he saw Benny. That was weakness. Let's end this, Rurik said. Gorik and Doran had retreated a few meters. Doran grabbed his axe again, his body trembling with pain, while Gorik was worried and thinking about how to escape. It was at that moment that Rurik and Kirian charged together. Their movements looked identical, only their strength and speed were different. The spears fell, and the brothers stood side by side trying to resist. But Gorik was already visibly exhausted. He had to make more moves to defend his wounded brother. But if he didn't do it, and his brother died, he would die the moment both focused on him. The brothers tried to hold out. But Kirian's speed surpassed the wounded Doran's attempts at defense, while Rurik's strength crushed every block. The gap widened between the two brothers until Kirian found the perfect opening. His spear sliced Doran's wrist, the axe fell, and the spear pierced perfectly through Doran's open mouth. Meanwhile, Rurik spun his spear and, with two quick moves, cut through Gorik's defense before brutally beheading him. Then, the field went silent. Only the sound of two bodies falling simultaneously was heard. So, it's over, Kirian thought. No, it's not over. Kirian. Take their bodies, for those who were killed today by them. For everyone who was killed before by them. We will burn their bodies until nothing remains of them in this world. Rurik said. Only then will the souls be at peace. Kirian nodded. If I were strong enough to do the mission alone, would I feel better? Kirian thought as he looked at the moon. Of the 15 who took part in the mission, only 2 died. The mission was considered a success. The cave's resources were distributed in the city, most of them to the families of the 2 soldiers who had perished. Kirian, Rurik, and the others were treated with respect by all, and the merchants returned to traveling along the road. Soon, things stabilized, and resources began to flow again into the isolated city. But those who died never returned. Kirian saw that Rurik had been sad for several days. Benny had been the most senior soldier besides him. So, he also decided in his mind. I guess that, besides my mother, Rurik would also be sad if I died. So, I have to work even harder. Right. After the mission, Kirian focused much of his time on absorbing the particles. Before, he only did this at night until he fell asleep. Now, he spent the morning training, while in the afternoon and evening he absorbed the particles. But they were scarce here, truly few compared to when he had been in the village. Kirian then began leaving the city, entering the forests around it and walking far away. Then he noticed there were far more in nature. He realized it would be best to train there. He told this to Rurik, who agreed easily, but with one condition. Kirian would have to defeat him. And so, 2 months after the bandit hunt, Kirian stood, breathing deeply, with his spear 1 centimeter from Rurik's neck. I lost, Rurik said, with a huge smile on his face. After that day, Kirian set out into the forests, absorbing as many particles as he could find. Hunting animals, training, observing nature with curiosity. But everything was so ordinary that, little by little, he grew bored. Until one day, he found signs in a forest with yellow leaves. There were signs showing the way to Fork City from Frosty Village. I'm going to visit Mom, Kirian said, and then set off toward the village. He remembered the path in his mind, even with snow covering the way. There were also marks the caravan chief had left at certain points to avoid getting lost. The journey was difficult. The cold, the snow, and the food he had quickly ran out. The animals, which were many in the forest there, were scarce. He found few, but it was enough. Kirian wouldn't die for a few days without food. To drink water, Kirian had to break the ice that had built up on some trees. It had a strange taste, but it worked. The journey was monotonous, just like his life during this training. After a week walking through the snow, suddenly, something appeared that changed Kirian's entire understanding of the world until now. The sky was dark. The icy wind hit his face as his feet sank into the snow. But this cold didn't affect him much. He approached a tree with a cut in its trunk indicating the direction. He decided to sit and rest a little and also drink water. But at that moment, a loud scream rang out in the sky. A high-pitched cry, a screech that hurt his ears. Along with it, a wild cold arose, snow beginning to fall like a storm. In the sky, Kirian saw it pass so quickly that he only caught a shadow, but it was huge, bigger than anything he had ever seen. What the hell is that? Kirian thought before his body collapsed, his eyes in tremendous pain as if they had seen something they shouldn't, as if they desired something they shouldn't. Kirian woke when it was already day, the sky cloudy with the usual white clouds. The last vision before he fainted came to his mind. Where? That was a bird? How is that possible? Kirian said out loud, pulling himself from the snow, trembling all over. How can something like that exist? Kirian shouted, thinking he might be insane, but the amount of snow around proved otherwise. Kirian touched them when that shadow passed for half a second, he felt as if his eyes wanted to devour something. Whatever that existence was, his eyes wanted it desperately. And Kirian felt instinctively, if his eyes wanted it, it would make him stronger. His eyes would evolve again. He was sure of it. I have to find that bird. But it went toward the center of the frozen land. It's impossible to go there, Captain Rurik said. There's no being that can survive past Frosty Village. As if something was preventing it, not even animals go near. The frozen land is not so simple. I feel like I don't really know anything about this world. Nothing. Kirian clenched his fists. In truth, he was excited. Excited about the world that awaited him. I'll visit Mom, and then I'll search for the bird. If I don't find it, I'll explore the world until I find more ways to grow stronger. Kirian decided, no longer walking at a calm pace. He decided to quicken his steps toward Frosty Village.